Picture this: a father clashing with his kin in epic struggles, heroes literally wrestling death itself, and gods throwing mountains at each other like angry toddlers. Welcome to Greek mythology, where family conflicts are intense and happily ever after is just a myth. These aren't just ancient bedtime stories. They're the twisted foundation of everything we call Western civilization. The Greeks didn't just create epic tales of gods and monsters. They invented the very way we think about heroes, villains, and everything in between. From Superman to Star Wars, from psychology to politics, it all traces back to these wild Mediterranean stories. Every time you hear about someone's Achilles heel or call something a Trojan horse, you're speaking ancient Greek. But here's the kicker. These myths weren't entertainment back then. They were religion, history, and science all rolled into one bloody package. Ready to dive into the most influential stories ever told? Trust me, after this journey, you'll never look at a family reunion the same way again. Greece isn't just beautiful, it's mythologically perfect. Picture a land chopped up by mountains and scattered with islands like breadcrumbs across the Mediterranean. This fractured landscape created isolated communities, each developing their own versions of divine stories. No wonder Greek mythology has more plot twists than a soap opera. The mountains weren't just pretty scenery, they became the thrones of gods. Mount Olympus wasn't chosen randomly. At nearly 10,000 feet, it disappeared into clouds most days, perfect for hiding divine shenanigans. The Greeks looked up and thought, yep, that's where the gods must live. Can you blame them? Those countless islands and peninsulas meant every community had their own local heroes and monsters. Crete got the Minotaur. Delos became Apollo's birthplace. Each rocky outcrop became a chapter in the growing mythological library. Geography literally shaped their gods. The sea was everywhere, unpredictable and powerful. This gave birth to Poseidon, not just a water god, but master of earthquakes and storms. When the ground shook under ancient Greek feet, they knew exactly who to blame. Poseidon was having another tantrum down there. Archaeological evidence shows religious practices dating back to the Paleolithic period. That's 40,000 years ago. Cave paintings in northern Greece depict ritualistic scenes that would make modern horror movies look tame. These early Greeks were already obsessed with the supernatural. Bronze Age settlements reveal sophisticated burial practices. Bodies were placed in fetal positions, surrounded by weapons and jewelry. Death wasn't the end. It was preparation for whatever came next. This belief in life after death would become central to later heroic myths. The Cycladic figurines from 3000 BCE show abstract human forms with folded arms. These mysterious statues might represent early goddess worship. Female fertility deities were huge in prehistoric Greece, setting the stage for powerful goddesses like Hera and Demeter. Minoan Crete, 3000 to 1100 BCE, developed Europe's first advanced civilization. Their palace at Knossos was a labyrinth of rooms and corridors. Sound familiar? This real-life maze probably inspired the legendary labyrinth where Theseus fought the Minotaur. Reality became myth. Minoan frescoes show bull-leaping ceremonies, athletes literally jumping over charging bulls. This dangerous sport became mythologized into the story of the Minotaur's sacrifice. Sometimes the craziest myths started as extreme sports. The Mycenaeans, 1600 to 1100 BCE, built fortress cities with walls so massive, later Greeks thought only giants could have built them. They called these Cyclopean walls, named after the one-eyed giants. Ancient Greeks were the first conspiracy theorists. Mycenaean tombs contained golden death masks, weapons, and enough treasure to make pirates jealous. These weren't just burials, they were sending kings to the afterlife in style. The idea of heroic death leading to eternal glory was already taking root. The collapse of these Bronze Age civilizations around 1200 BCE created a dark age. But darkness breeds the best stories. Without written records, oral traditions flourished. The traumatic collapse became mythologized into stories of golden ages lost and heroes who could never return. The Mycenaeans weren't just ancient Greeks. They were the real-life inspiration for Homer's heroes. Their massive fortress cities dotted the landscape like ancient military bases. Mycenae, Tyrans, Pylos, these names echo through the Iliad and Odyssey for good reason. Linear B tablets, cracked by brilliant linguist Michael Ventris in 1952, revealed the Mycenaeans spoke an early form of Greek. Suddenly, we could read their shopping lists, tax records, and religious inventories. Talk about ancient paperwork. These tablets prove that many mythological figures had historical roots. The tablets mention gods like Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, and Artemis, 800 years before Homer. The Mycenaeans were already worshipping the Olympic pantheon. They weren't inventing gods. They were inheriting them from even earlier traditions. The divine family tree runs deeper than anyone imagined. Pylos tablets record offerings to Potnia, the great goddess. This mysterious female deity later evolved into multiple goddesses: Demeter, Hera, and Athena. The Mycenaeans loved their powerful women, both divine and mortal. Queen Clytemnestra's murder of Agamemnon wasn't just myth, it reflected real Mycenaean power struggles. Archaeological evidence suggests the Trojan War actually happened around 1250 BCE. The city of Troy, Hisarlik in modern Turkey, shows signs of siege warfare and destruction. Layer Cerevene burned violently, matching Homer's timeline. Sometimes ancient poets were better historians than we gave them credit for. Mycenaean warriors wore bronze armor and carried figure-eight shields exactly like those described in Homer. Their graves contained bronze weapons, golden cups, and war chariots. These weren't just stories. They were cultural memories passed down through generations of oral tradition. The Mask of Agamemnon, found by Heinrich Schliemann, dates to 1550–1500 BCE, too early for the legendary king. But it shows the wealth and craftsmanship of Mycenaean royalty. Every golden artifact proved that Homer's descriptions of gleaming palaces weren't fantasy. Mycenaean palaces were administrative centers controlling vast territories. The king, Wanax, ruled from a great hall, Megaron, where epic poems were probably first performed. Picture firelight dancing on painted walls while bards sang of ancient heroes. The setting for Greek mythology was literally built into the architecture. The Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE destroyed this glittering civilization. Climate change, invasions by mysterious sea peoples, and internal conflicts brought down the palace system. Imagine entire cities abandoned, their libraries burned, their kings forgotten. This catastrophe echoes through Greek mythology as the end of the heroic age. Without written records, the Mycenaean world became mythologized. Real kings became legendary heroes. Historical events became epic adventures. The traumatic collapse was remembered as the time when gods walked among men, but that golden age was forever lost. The Dark Ages had begun. But darkness preserves stories like nothing else. Without writing, oral tradition became the only way to preserve the past. Professional bards, Ialaidos, memorized thousands of lines of poetry. They weren't just entertainers, they were living libraries, keeping Mycenaean memories alive through song. These oral poets didn't just recite, they improvised, adapted, and embellished. Each performance was slightly different, allowing stories to evolve over centuries. Historical events became legendary adventures. Real people became mythical heroes. The line between history and mythology blurred until they became inseparable. The bards used formulaic phrases and rhythmic patterns to aid memory. Rosy-fingered dawn, wine-dark sea, swift-footed Achilles. These weren't just pretty words. They were mnemonic devices that helped poets remember epic stories. Every formula carried the weight of cultural memory. Regional variations emerged as different communities preserved their own versions of shared stories. Athenian bards emphasized Theseus. Theban poets celebrated Oedipus. Each city-state claimed its own piece of the heroic past. Mythology became a form of ancient nationalism. The warrior culture of the Mycenaeans survived in mythological values. Honor, glory, and heroic death in battle became central to Greek identity. Achilles choosing a short, glorious life over a long, obscure one reflected real Mycenaean ideals. The hero's code was written in bronze and blood. Trade networks connected Mycenaean Greece to Egypt, Anatolia, and the Levant. This cultural exchange influenced mythological themes. Egyptian stories of divine kingship, Mesopotamian flood myths, and Anatolian mother goddesses all left traces in Greek legends. Mythology was always an international affair. In the beginning was chaos. Not the messy kind you're thinking of, but a gaping void of nothingness. Picture the ultimate empty space before existence itself figured out how to exist. From this cosmic emptiness came the first generation of gods. Talk about making something from nothing. Gaia, Earth, emerged first, followed by Tartarus, the deepest underworld, and Eros, primordial love. These weren't characters with personalities. They were fundamental forces of existence: earth, depth, and attraction. The Greeks started their mythology with a physics lesson wrapped in divine drama. Gaia gave birth to Uranus, sky, without any partner. Then she married her own son and had children with him. The Titans were born from this sky-earth union. Even by mythological standards, this family tree needs serious therapy. But it made perfect sense to the Greeks. Earth and sky naturally belong together. Uranus hated his children and pushed them back into Gaia's womb. Imagine being pregnant forever because your husband won't let the kids out. Gaia was understandably furious. She crafted an adamantine sickle and convinced her youngest son Cronus to castrate his father. The first recorded case of extreme family conflict resolution. When Cronus cut off Uranus's genitals and threw them into the sea, they created foam that gave birth to Aphrodite. The goddess of love and beauty was literally born from divine male anatomy, hitting ocean water. The Greeks had the wildest origin stories for everything, including romance. Cronus became the new ruler, but inherited his father's paranoia. An oracle warned that one of his children would overthrow him. His solution? Eat every baby immediately after birth. Rhea, his wife, watched in horror as Cronus devoured Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Ancient birth control at its most extreme. When Zeus was born, Rhea had enough. She wrapped a stone in baby clothes and fed it to Cronus instead. The king of the Titans literally ate a rock, thinking it was his son. Meanwhile, baby Zeus was hidden in a cave on Crete, raised by nymphs and fed on goat's milk and honey. The infant Zeus was protected by the Curetes, warrior priests who clashed their shields whenever he cried. They turned diaper changes into military operations. This divine daycare program kept Zeus secret until he grew strong enough to challenge his father. Even gods needed babysitters, apparently. When Zeus reached adulthood, he got revenge with style. He disguised himself as a cupbearer and gave Cronus a special drink that made him vomit up all the swallowed children. Imagine the family reunion, siblings meeting for the first time as adults after being stuck in dad's stomach. The ultimate case of arrested development. The Titanomachy, War of the Titans, began immediately. Zeus and his newly freed siblings faced off against Cronus and the older generation of gods. This wasn't just a family fight. It was a cosmic war that shook the foundations of reality. The battle raged for 10 years with neither side gaining advantage. Zeus won by making strategic alliances. He freed the Cyclopes from Tartarus, and they crafted divine weapons in gratitude. Zeus received his thunderbolt, Poseidon got his trident, and Hades claimed the helmet of invisibility. The first recorded case of weapons manufacturing determining divine politics. The Hierarchies, hundred-handed giants, also joined Zeus's side. These monsters could throw boulders like machine guns, overwhelming the Titans with sheer firepower. Sometimes the key to victory is finding the right allies, even if they're completely weird-looking. After the Olympians won, they divided the cosmos by drawing lots. Zeus got the sky, Poseidon claimed the seas, and Hades ruled the underworld. The earth remained neutral territory. This divine real estate division created the basic structure of Greek religious geography. Every prayer knew exactly which god controlled which neighborhood. The defeated Titans were imprisoned in Tartarus, guarded by the Hierarchies. But not all Titans were punished. Prometheus and Epimetheus had sided with Zeus and remained free. This created the myth of the Titan who stole fire for humanity. Even cosmic wars have their collaborators and resistance fighters. Zeus established the New World Order from Mount Olympus. The 12 Olympian gods became the ruling council of the universe. But Zeus's leadership style was complicated. He married his sister Hera, then had countless affairs with mortals and immortals alike. Divine power apparently came with divine relationship problems. The creation myths served multiple purposes beyond entertainment. They explained natural phenomena. Thunder was Zeus's anger, earthquakes meant Poseidon was upset, and volcanic eruptions happened when the Titans stirred in Tartarus. Science and mythology were the same thing in ancient Greece. These stories also reflected social hierarchies. The Olympians' victory over the Titans represented the triumph of civilization over chaos, order over wildness, and Greek culture over foreign influences. Every myth was also a political statement about who deserved to rule and why. The cosmic succession myth, Uranus, Cronus, Zeus, echoed Near Eastern stories like the Babylonian Enuma Elish and Hittite Kumarbi cycle. But the Greeks added their own twist. Zeus's rule was final and just, not temporary. Their gods had learned from previous mistakes and created a stable divine government, at least in theory. The birth of the gods established the template for all later Greek mythology. Divine families with human-like personalities, cosmic battles with political implications, and natural phenomena explained through divine drama. Everything that made Greek mythology uniquely captivating started right here, in the beginning, with chaos and the birth of order from cosmic emptiness. The gods were impressive, but they stayed up on Mount Olympus most of the time. Heroes? They walked among regular people. They showed mortals what was possible when divine blood mixed with human determination. These weren't just strong guys with good PR teams. They were cultural icons who shaped how Greeks thought about courage, honor, and what it meant to be truly great. Heracles stands as the ultimate Greek hero. Born from Zeus's affair with the mortal woman Alcmene, he possessed incredible strength from birth. Remember those snakes Hera sent to his crib? That was just the beginning of her lifetime vendetta against him. But Heracles turned every challenge into a victory story. His famous 12 labors weren't just random monster hunting missions. They were a journey of redemption after Hera drove him temporarily insane. The Nemean lion had skin so tough that weapons couldn't pierce it. Heracles strangled it with his bare hands and wore its hide as armor. The Hydra grew 2 heads for everyone he cut off, so he had his nephew Iolaus burn the neck stumps to stop the regeneration. Talk about teamwork making the dream work. Each labor taught Greeks different values: persistence, cleverness, and the importance of accepting help from others. Perseus represents the hero as monster slayer and kingdom founder. His mother Danae was locked in a bronze tower by her father, who feared a prophecy about his death. Zeus visited her as Golden Rain, creative dating strategies of the gods. When Perseus was born, both mother and child were cast into the sea in a wooden chest. They washed up on the island of Seriphos, where Perseus grew up as a fisherman's adopted son. The quest for Medusa's head became Perseus's defining moment. Unlike other Gorgons, Medusa was mortal. But one look at her face turned viewers to stone. Perseus received divine help: winged sandals from Hermes, a mirrored shield from Athena, and a sword from Hephaestus. He used the shield's reflection to avoid looking directly at Medusa while cutting off her head. From her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse that would become another iconic symbol. Theseus embodied the hero as civilizer and king. His journey from Trojan to Athens was like a monster elimination tour. He killed the Periphetes with his own bronze club, then kept the weapon as his signature. The Cynics used to tie travelers between 2 bent pine trees and let them snap back. Theseus gave him a taste of his own medicine. Each victory made the road safer for ordinary people. The Minotaur mission cemented Theseus's reputation forever. King Minos of Crete demanded 7 young men and 7 young women from Athens every 9 years as tribute. They were fed to the Minotaur in the labyrinth beneath his palace. Theseus volunteered to be one of the victims, planning to kill the monster instead. Princess Ariadne fell in love with him and provided the famous thread that let him navigate back out of the maze. Jason and the Argonauts represented the hero as team leader and explorer. The quest for the Golden Fleece brought together the greatest heroes of the generation. Orpheus provided the soundtrack with his magical music. The twins Castor and Pollux brought their legendary fighting skills. Atalanta was the lone female Argonaut, famous for being faster than any man. Their ship, the Argo, was built with a piece of the prophetic oak from Zeus's oracle at Dodona. The challenges they faced were like a supernatural obstacle course. The simple gauges were clashing rocks that crushed ships trying to pass through. Jason sent a dove through first. When it lost only its tail feathers, they knew they could make it with perfect timing. The Harpies tormented the blind prophet Phineas until the winged sons of Boreas drove them away. Each challenge required different skills and teamwork. Bellerophon's story shows how quickly heroic fame could turn to disaster. Riding Pegasus, he defeated the fire-breathing chimera that was terrorizing Lycia. The monster had a lion's head, goat's body, and serpent's tail, basically a nightmare committee's creation. Bellerophon became so proud of his achievements that he tried to fly to Mount Olympus uninvited. Zeus sent a gadfly to sting Pegasus, and Bellerophon fell back to earth, spending his final years as a blind, limping wanderer. The Seven Against Thebes tells the story of Polynices trying to reclaim his throne from his brother Eteocles. Both brothers were sons of Oedipus, inheriting the family curse along with their political ambitions. Polynices gathered 6 allies, each commanding their own forces against one of Thebes' 7 gates. The siege failed spectacularly, with the brothers killing each other in single combat. Only Adrastus survived to tell the tale and plan revenge with their sons, the Epigoni. Meleager's story centers on the Caledonian boar hunt, one of the great communal heroic adventures. King Aeneas forgot to honor Artemis in his harvest sacrifices, so she sent a massive boar to ravage his lands. Heroes came from all over Greece to join the hunt, including Atalanta, who struck the first blow. Meleager killed the boar, but gave Atalanta the hide as a trophy, causing a family feud that ended with his own death. Hero cults developed around these legendary figures, turning them into local protectors and guides. Cities claimed specific heroes as founders or guardians. Athens especially honored Theseus, crediting him with unifying the region under one government. Sparta claimed the Dioscuri, Castor and Pollux, as their special protectors. These weren't just stories, they were civic identity and divine insurance policies rolled into one. The moral lessons embedded in heroic stories shaped Greek values for centuries. Heroes showed that great deeds required great sacrifices. They demonstrated that hubris, excessive pride, led to downfall, even for the mightiest warriors. Perseus remained humble after his victories and became a wise king. Bellerophon let success go to his head and paid the price. The pattern was clear. Heroes who remembered their mortality thrived, while those who forgot it fell. Archaeological evidence suggests some heroes had historical origins. The Mycenaean palace at Pylos might have inspired stories about Nestor, the wise old king in Homer's epics. Troy's destruction around 1200 BCE provides a possible backdrop for the Trojan War legends. Hero tombs and shrines have been found at sites throughout Greece, showing how these stories connected mythological past with physical landscape. The heroic age represented a bridge between the divine and human worlds. Heroes proved that mortals could achieve godlike deeds through courage, cleverness, and divine favor. They showed that individuals could shape history and protect their communities, but they also demonstrated human limitations. Even the greatest heroes faced death, made mistakes, and sometimes caused the very disasters they tried to prevent. Women heroes like Atalanta challenged traditional gender roles while still operating within them. She could outrun any man and shoot straighter than most hunters, but her story still ended with marriage and motherhood. Medea used her knowledge of magic to help Jason succeed, but when he betrayed her, she became one of mythology's most terrifying figures of revenge. These stories explored the tension between individual achievement and social expectations. The influence of heroic tales spread far beyond Greece itself. Romans adopted Greek heroes wholesale, sometimes giving them new names but keeping their essential stories. Heracles became Hercules, maintaining his popularity through the centuries. Perseus's victory over Medusa inspired countless dragon-slaying tales in medieval literature. The heroic journey pattern, departure, trials, return, became a template for storytelling that we still use today. Modern psychology has found new meanings in these ancient tales. The hero's journey reflects patterns of personal growth and transformation that resonate across cultures. Heracles' 12 labors represent the challenges we all face in overcoming our flaws and limitations. Perseus's use of reflection to defeat Medusa suggests the power of self-knowledge and indirect approaches to seemingly impossible problems. The heroic ideals of ancient Greece continue to influence how we think about leadership, courage, and moral responsibility. These weren't perfect role models. They made mistakes, had flaws, and sometimes failed spectacularly. But that's exactly why their stories remain powerful. They show us that heroism isn't about being flawless. It's about facing challenges with determination, learning from failures, and never giving up on doing what's right. Can you imagine having to prove your worth by fighting monsters and completing impossible tasks? These heroes didn't just fight for glory. They fought to show that humans could rise above their circumstances and achieve something truly extraordinary. But wait until you hear how these amazing stories survived for thousands of years without books or libraries. The next part reveals the incredible journey from songs around campfires to written words that changed everything. Picture this: no books, no writing, no Google. Yet somehow the Greeks preserved thousands of years of stories, genealogies, and cultural wisdom with perfect accuracy. How? Through the most advanced memory technology ever developed, the human brain trained by generations of professional storytellers. These weren't just people who liked to chat. They were walking libraries with supernatural recall abilities. The bards were the internet of the ancient world. They traveled from city to city carrying news, entertainment, and cultural identity in their heads. These performers could recite entire epics lasting several days without missing a beat. They didn't just memorize stories word for word like robots. They were creative artists who adapted tales to their audiences while preserving the essential plots and themes. Rhapsodes represented the next level of specialization. While bards created and modified stories, rhapsodes focused on perfect preservation of established classics. They were like human recording devices, dedicated to maintaining the exact words and rhythms of masterpieces like the Iliad and Odyssey. Their training was so intense that they could detect if someone changed even a single word in a familiar passage. The oral tradition used sophisticated memory techniques that would impress modern mnemonists. Repetitive phrases called formulaic expressions helped both performer and audience remember key points. Rosy-fingered dawn always introduced morning scenes. Wine-dark sea painted oceanic imagery. These weren't just pretty words. They were memory anchors that kept stories organized and recognizable across generations. Meter and rhythm served as built-in error-checking systems. Greek epic poetry followed strict patterns that made mistakes obvious to trained ears. If a line didn't scan properly, everyone knew something was wrong. This musical structure meant that stories were essentially songs, making them much easier to remember than prose. Try forgetting the tune to your favorite song. It's nearly impossible. The competitive performance culture kept standards incredibly high. Bards competed at festivals and royal courts, where audiences knew the stories intimately and could spot errors or inferior versions immediately. Success meant fame, wealth, and prestigious positions. Failure meant unemployment and public humiliation. Talk about performance pressure. Only the most skilled practitioners survived in this demanding environment. Regional variations added richness while maintaining core integrity. Different cities preferred different heroes or emphasized different aspects of familiar stories. Athenian bards naturally highlighted Theseus's adventures, while Spartan performers focused on tales of military valor. These variations reflected local pride while keeping the broader mythological framework intact across the Greek world. The alphabet revolution changed everything around the 8th century BCE. Greeks adapted the Phoenician writing system, adding vowels to create the first truly phonetic alphabet. Suddenly, the exact sounds of spoken language could be captured in written form. This wasn't just a technical innovation. It was a cultural earthquake that transformed how knowledge was preserved and transmitted. Homer's epics became the first major beneficiaries of this new technology. The Iliad and Odyssey were likely composed orally, but written down soon after the alphabet's adoption. This created the first authorized versions of stories that had existed in countless variations. The written text became standards against which all future performances were measured. The transition wasn't smooth or immediate. Many traditional bards resisted writing, viewing it as a threat to their art and livelihood. They argued that written texts were lifeless compared to living performance, unable to adapt to different audiences or occasions. They had a point. Reading silently from a scroll lacks the drama and immediacy of a skilled performer, bringing characters to life through voice and gesture. Plato famously criticized writing in his dialogue, Phaedrus, ironically using written words to do so. He worried that external writing would weaken internal memory, making people mentally lazy and dependent on artificial aids. He compared written words to paintings. They look like living things, but can't answer questions or adapt to circumstances. Some of his concerns prove prophetic in our digital age. Schools and education systems gradually incorporated written texts alongside oral instruction. Students learned to read Homer and other classics, but they also memorized large portions and practiced recitation. The goal wasn't just literacy, but cultural fluency, the ability to recognize and use the references, themes, and language patterns that defined Greek civilization. Libraries emerged as new cultural institutions, beginning with private collections of wealthy individuals and eventually developing into public repositories. The Great Library of Alexandria, founded in the 3rd century BCE, represented the pinnacle of this development. It actively collected written versions of oral traditions from throughout the Mediterranean world, preserving stories that might otherwise have been lost forever. The standardization of texts created new opportunities and challenges. Written versions allowed for more detailed analysis and comparison of different stories and traditions. Scholars could study contradictions, trace influences, and develop systematic understanding of mythological patterns. But standardization also meant that minor variations and local traditions were often lost or marginalized in favor of official versions. Professional scribes became the new custodians of cultural memory. These weren't just copyists, but educated specialists who understood the materials they were preserving. They made editorial decisions about spelling, punctuation, and textual variants. Their work determined which versions of stories would survive and which would be forgotten. In many ways, they shaped Greek culture as much as the original poets. The spread of literacy gradually democratized access to mythological knowledge. Stories that were once the exclusive domain of professional performers became available to anyone who could read. This expanded audience led to new forms of literature. Tragedies, comedies, philosophical works that assumed readers' familiarity with mythological references and themes. The Greek city-state wasn't just a political arrangement. It was a sacred community bound together by shared gods, rituals, and mythological heritage. Every polis had its patron deity, its founding myths, and its sacred calendar that structured civic life around religious observance. Politics and religion weren't separate spheres, but two aspects of the same community identity. Athens claimed Athena as its divine protector after she won a competition with Poseidon. The contest was simple. Whoever gave the city the most useful gift would become its patron. Poseidon struck the Acropolis with his trident, creating a saltwater spring. Athena planted an olive tree, providing food, oil, and wood. The Athenians chose practical utility over dramatic displays, a decision that perfectly reflected their cultural values. The Parthenon dominated Athens' skyline as both temple and symbol of civic pride. This wasn't just a place of worship, but a statement of political power and cultural achievement. The massive statue of Athena inside, crafted by Phidias from gold and ivory, represented the city's wealth and artistic sophistication. Every citizen could see the temple from anywhere in the city, a constant reminder of divine protection and communal identity. Sparta's approach to sacred space reflected its military culture and dual kingship. The city had two main temples, one for Athena Chalcioikos, Athena of the Bronze House, and another for Artemis Orthia. The famous agoge training system included brutal rituals at Artemis's altar, where young Spartans endured flogging to test their endurance. Religion and military preparation were completely integrated aspects of citizen development. Mystery cults offered exclusive spiritual experiences beyond the public religious calendar. The Eleusinian mysteries, centered on Demeter and Persephone, promised initiates special knowledge about death and the afterlife. These weren't just religious ceremonies, but social networks that connected people across city-state boundaries. Even slaves could be initiated, creating rare opportunities for social mobility and spiritual equality. The Dionysiac festivals blended religious devotion with theatrical innovation. The Great Dionysia in Athens featured dramatic competitions where playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides premiered their works. These weren't just entertainment, but civic education, exploring moral and political themes through mythological stories. The entire community participated as audience, judges, and sponsors of the productions. Oracle sites like Delphi functioned as international religious centers that transcended local politics. The Pythia, Apollo's priestess, delivered prophecies that influenced major decisions throughout the Greek world. Cities consulted the oracle before founding colonies, declaring wars, or making constitutional changes. The ambiguous nature of oracular responses required careful interpretation, creating a whole profession of religious specialists. Sacred games combined athletic competition with religious devotion, creating pan-Hellenic festivals that brought Greeks together despite their political divisions. The Olympic Games honored Zeus, the Pythian Games celebrated Apollo, and the Isthmian Games honored Poseidon. These events weren't just sports competitions, but religious rituals that reinforced shared cultural identity across the fractured political landscape. Temple architecture reflected both divine honor and civic competition. Each city tried to build more impressive temples than its neighbors, leading to an architectural arms race that produced some of history's most beautiful buildings. The temples weren't just religious structures, but economic engines that attracted pilgrims, tourists, and trading opportunities. Divine worship and civic prosperity went hand in hand. Festivals structured the calendar and rhythm of civic life. Athens alone celebrated over 120 festival days per year, each dedicated to specific deities and community activities. The Panathenea honored Athena with processions, sacrifices, and athletic competitions. The Thesmophoria allowed married women to conduct secret rituals for Demeter. These events created shared experiences that bonded citizens together across class and occupational lines. Sacred laws regulated both religious practice and social behavior, showing how mythology provided practical guidance for community life. These weren't just ritual requirements, but moral codes that shaped daily interactions. Laws about temple asylum, sacred boundaries, and pollution taboos created legal frameworks that protected the vulnerable and maintained social order through religious sanction. The integration of hero cults into civic religion connected mythological past with contemporary politics. Cities claimed specific heroes as founders, protectors, or moral exemplars. Theseus became Athens' democratic hero, credited with unifying the region under representative government. Lycurgus served as Sparta's legendary lawgiver, whose constitution was supposedly divinely inspired and unchangeable. Religious personnel formed a complex hierarchy that interacted with political leadership. Priests and priestesses weren't necessarily full-time professionals, but often served terms like political magistrates. The Archon Basileus in Athens held responsibility for religious matters, showing how civic and sacred authority were intertwined. Religious offices provided alternative paths to prominence for those excluded from military or political careers. Sacred geography shaped urban planning and territorial identity. Cities were built around their most important temples, with religious processions defining the sacred boundaries of the community. The placement of shrines, altars, and sacred groves created a spiritual landscape that guided daily movement and reinforced mythological connections to the land. International sanctuaries like Olympia and Delphi created neutral zones where Greeks could meet peacefully despite ongoing conflicts. These sites were protected by sacred truces that suspended warfare during religious festivals. They functioned as diplomatic centers, trading posts, and cultural exchange venues that maintained Greek unity even when political fragmentation reached its peak. The colonial movement spread Greek religious practices throughout the Mediterranean, creating a network of sister cities connected by shared mythological heritage. Colonists carried sacred fire from their mother city's hearth to light the altar of their new home. They brought copies of important cult statues and established festivals that maintained cultural ties across vast distances. This religious framework didn't just unite Greeks, it also defined who was excluded from their community. Barbarians weren't just foreigners, but people who didn't share Greek religious practices and mythological understanding. The Persian Wars were fought not just for political independence, but for the right to maintain traditional religious customs against foreign interference. You think modern cities have complicated politics? Greek city-states had to balance human ambitions with divine demands, local traditions with international connections, and individual desires with community needs, all while keeping their patron gods happy. But these religious foundations were just the beginning of Greek influence. Wait until you see how these ancient myths conquered the entire world and still shape how we think today. When Alexander the Great died in 323 BCE, something incredible happened. Greek culture didn't die with him. It exploded across 3 continents. His generals carved up the empire, but they all kept one thing: Greek mythology as their cultural backbone. From Egypt to India, local gods suddenly had Greek names and Greek stories. The Ptolemies in Egypt were masters of mythological fusion. They turned Isis into a Greek-style goddess. They made Serapis, mixing Greek Zeus with Egyptian Osiris. Even Cleopatra claimed descent from Aphrodite herself. Talk about divine marketing. Nothing sells like saying you're related to the goddess of love. Meanwhile, the Seleucids spread Greek myths all the way to Afghanistan. Local artists carved Hercules fighting lions on Buddhist temples. Apollo appeared on coins next to Indian elephants. It was the ancient world's first cultural mashup. Then came the Romans, and boy did they love a good Greek story. They basically did a copy-paste job with the entire pantheon. Zeus became Jupiter. Aphrodite turned into Venus. Hermes got a Roman makeover as Mercury. The Romans were like that friend who borrows your homework and changes just enough words to avoid getting caught. But the Romans added their own twist. They made the myths more political. Aeneas, a Trojan hero, became the founder of Rome. Venus was his mother, making Romans literally descendants of gods. Augustus claimed Apollo as his personal patron. Every emperor needed a mythological backstory. It was ancient political branding at its finest. Roman poets took Greek stories and ran with them. Ovid's Metamorphoses became the ultimate mythology textbook. Virgil's Aeneid rivaled Homer's epics. These weren't just entertaining stories anymore. They were literature that would survive millennia. Good thing too, because what came next nearly wiped them out completely. Christianity's rise should have killed Greek mythology. Early Christians saw pagan gods as demons or false idols. They burned temples and smashed statues. For centuries, knowing Greek myths could get you in serious trouble. But here's the twist. The stories were too good to die. Medieval scholars kept the myths alive in secret. They disguised Greek gods as allegories for Christian virtues. Hercules became a symbol of Christ's struggle against evil. Apollo represented divine wisdom. It was mythology in witness protection, hidden but not dead. The Renaissance changed everything. Suddenly, Greek myths weren't dangerous. They were fashionable. Artists like Botticelli painted Venus rising from the sea. Michelangelo carved gods with perfect Greek proportions. Rich patrons commissioned mythological scenes for their palaces. Knowing your Ovid became a sign of education and sophistication. Shakespeare couldn't resist Greek mythology either. A Midsummer Night's Dream features Theseus and Hippolyta. The Tempest echoes stories of magical islands and divine intervention. Even when he wasn't directly using myths, the themes were there: fate, hubris, transformation. The bard understood that these ancient stories still spoke to human nature. The Enlightenment brought a new twist. Philosophers used Greek myths to explore human psychology. They weren't interested in whether Zeus was real. They wanted to know what the stories revealed about the human condition. This laid the groundwork for something revolutionary that was coming in the next century. Enter Sigmund Freud, and suddenly Greek myths were back in a big way. The Oedipus complex, the Electra complex, narcissism. Freud saw ancient psychological truths in these old stories. His student Carl Jung took it further, arguing that mythological patterns were hardwired into the human unconscious. Mythology went from entertainment to science. Modern psychology still uses Greek mythological terms. We talk about someone having an Achilles heel or opening Pandora's box. Therapists discuss narcissistic personality disorder. These aren't just colorful metaphors. They're precise psychological concepts rooted in ancient stories. Who knew that Bronze Age Greeks were such good psychologists? Hollywood discovered the goldmine of Greek mythology in the 20th century. Jason and the Argonauts thrilled audiences with stop-motion monsters. Clash of the Titans brought Perseus to the big screen. More recently, movies like Troy and 300 proved that ancient stories could still pack theaters. And don't get us started on the Percy Jackson phenomenon. Greek gods in modern America. Literature never stopped mining Greek mythology for inspiration. James Joyce's Ulysses retells the Odyssey in modern Dublin. Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series introduces Greek gods to millions of young readers. Margaret Atwood's The Penelopiad gives Penelope her own voice. These aren't just retellings. They're reimaginings that make ancient stories speak to contemporary concerns. Video games have become the newest battlefield for mythological heroes. God of War lets players literally fight Greek gods. Assassin's Creed Odyssey recreates ancient Greece in stunning detail. Hades turns the underworld into an addictive, roguelike adventure. Modern technology has given us something the ancients could only dream of: the ability to actually experience these mythological worlds. Even our language is saturated with Greek mythology. We talk about Herculean tasks and Trojan horses. Someone might have a Midas touch or open a Pandora's box. Businesses use mythological names: Nike, Amazon, Oracle. These references work because the stories are still part of our shared cultural vocabulary. That's the ultimate proof of mythology's enduring power. So here we are, thousands of years later, and Greek mythology refuses to die. These Bronze Age stories about feuding gods and impossible heroes have somehow become the foundation of Western culture. They've survived the fall of empires, the rise of new religions, and the digital revolution. Why? Because they're really stories about us. Every time someone struggles with their parents, they're living out the Oedipus story. When technology creates unintended consequences, we're opening Pandora's box all over again. When someone's pride leads to their downfall, they're walking in Icarus's footsteps. Greek mythology didn't just influence our culture, it gave us a language for understanding the human experience.